Hello, everyone. This is Zayami Eccles-Irwin from FilmFestivalCircuit.com and the director of the Oregon Documentary Film Festival. Right now, we're gearing up for our fall screening, which is going to take place on September 29th at the beautiful historic Clinton Street Theater in Portland, Oregon. It's going to be a day of networking, films, refreshments. It's going to be great. Please check it out. And in order to get ready for that, we've been talking with some of our participating filmmakers. Today, we're talking with Sarah Shively, who's the director behind the story project of Measure 110. Sarah, thank you so much for speaking with me.
Well, thank you for having me.
So we actually, I talked to you last year about your documentary on Darcel. It's really cool to see that you're still making important films about Portland and the Portland culture. And I really, really enjoyed the story project of Measure 110, and it's comes at a good time right now when people are reevaluating Measure 110, and there's a lot of, kind of toxic divisiveness around this. So it was interesting. How did you get involved with this topic?
Well, actually, when I was still in the graduate program, I had done an explainer video in 2022, a year after the decrim had been in effect. And at that time, I had an interview with Morgan Godvin. And so we began more specifically focusing in on Measure 110. I had been working with Morgan as well on another piece that I did as a graduate student called Mugshots in the Digital Age. And that was part of a digital ethics course that I had taken at the time. So my key person here was Morgan. And when about the time I finished the program, Morgan came to me and said, we really need to do another update about Measure 110. And I said, well, yes, but I'd like to do something more. I'd like to really dig into this in a way that I don't feel other media organizations were really doing. And she said, well, let me get back to you. And we were able to come up with some grant funding. And that has set us up to do a 3-part docuseries. So this first part, Peers, we started shooting in spring of 2023.
Okay.
Okay. And so almost all of the footage was done at that time. And then we started reshooting for the second piece in fall of 2023 because when I knew that we had a group of Oregon representatives going to Portugal to
Oh,
learn about decrim, I wanted to make sure we got coverage on that. So we actually covered that as well. And that some of that footage, along with footage we've been getting this spring as House Bill 4002 was passed, will go into the second piece. And that piece is really started out initially to be about decriminalization, and it's now about decrim recrim.
hmm.
Uh,
Okay, yeah. Oh, that's very interesting. Well, this story is actually progressing quite a bit as you film it, and the third part, who knows what that'll be? I mean, hopefully it's positive, but
yeah,
uh,
well, I think it will be because we had already planned that the third part would be focused on housing.
okay,
Housing was, of course, the thing that was going to take the longest to see any kind of real benefit from,
right,
because the funding, whether it was coming from Measure 110 or from other sources, was really just beginning to roll out. And it's still, I mean, even with House Bill 4002, there's still a nice infusion of funding for housing. So we're hoping to see some changes and some real positive impact around housing for people who are in the drug treatment space.
totally. Well, tell me, what was it like, since you've already made a film about this topic and you've been working with Measure 110 as a topic for a while, and you've been working with Morgan, what was it like getting into the weeds and meeting the peers, meeting participants in that program, and also just really getting into understanding the measure in all its facets? Was Morgan a big help with that, or were you really going in there and talking a lot with people? What was it like getting kind of acquainted really deeply with this process?
Sure. Yeah. Well, I couldn't have done this without Morgan. She was certainly central to the whole process. She's essentially our subject matter expert. And I wanted to make sure that we were focusing on the human stories behind the peer workforce in particular. The peer workforce was the part of Measure 110 that had the most immediate rollout and the most immediate
Mm.
effect, because they were able to hire more peers and pay them better to do harm reduction, to do the work that they do, to help with the assessments and so on. And so that was really something tangible. And the peers that we focused in on, Candy Balaban, who works with Columbia Community Mental Health. That was a connection through Morgan.
Okay.
As I was looking for someone, I wanted someone from a rural community, and Candy and Morgan had crossed paths at some point in jail. And
Oh
so
wow.
they knew each other, and they both were willing to move forward with that. So we had an initial Zoom meeting, the three of us. We talked it out. I went out, I met with Candy at her work site. We talked about how we wanted to proceed with her team, how, because she supervises a larger group of people who are doing harm reduction. And so that was how that piece of it kind of came about. Working with Will Johnson at Miracles Club came about because I reached out initially to Bridges to Change, and Monty directed me to Miracles because I wanted an urban group, and ideally I
Mm.
wanted to work with the BIPOC community. So I went through Julia Mines, the executive director at Miracles Club, and I said, look, I'm looking for, a really sort of dynamic peer supervisor, someone who, would be willing to talk with me and work with me. And she said, oh, you've got to talk to Will. So that's how I got connected to Will. And from there, initially, I wasn't particularly interested in talking with clients and people in active recovery. But Will, in order to really see Will work and see Will do Will best,
Right.
we had to have the clients there. So we zeroed in on two people, Daniel and John, who were living at the men's house. And they were very cooperative, and they opened up their hearts, and they just became such incredibly important figures to this whole project that there was no way I could not include them.
Totally.
So it became a little more peopled than I initially had intended, but I think it really helped us see our peers in action.
Definitely. Well, I really admire the breadth and the wide scope of this film, but the organization is so great. I feel like you start in a very specific place, and I love how it branches out to people like Will, and then also the people that he's mentoring, and it just has a really nice flow. And I'm wondering, what were some of the challenges of shooting this and having to go all around and organize all something so big like this? What were those challenges like?
Yeah, well, certainly there were challenges because, I had a limited budget for this piece. We
Mm,
had $15,000 to work with, and that influenced how many days I could put into production, and what I was able to do with that that time. Um, and so there were certainly things that we didn't get. I didn't get nearly as much B-roll as I ideally would have liked.
mm,
For my taste, the piece is still a little interview heavy, a
okay.
little too much time spent just watching people in their interview. I think we used, I mean, every little piece of B-roll that we had, we used it, and then I went back out and shot drone. Um,
Okay.
so that was all done way after the fact. And we do have even a clip at the very end of the piece now, which you may not yet have seen because I had to make a few changes
Oh, okay.
in light of 4002. There's a little clip of some folks from Instituto Latino doing outreach. And I find, we just got that in
Right.
just a few weeks ago. And we had to change the very, very end to reflect the situation we're in at this moment. So we're trying to help it, not necessarily have a cliffhanger, but a tie into the next piece.
Right, work it. Oh, that's so exciting. It really is a living document. I mean, it's alive with process in the story that's unfolding before us. That's cool to hear. Um, well, tell me a little bit about the editing process. You're talking about, wanting a little bit more B-roll, kind of wanting to maybe change a little bit of how it appears. But did you do the editing?
No, my wife Marilis Ernst is an
Okay,
editor, and so
very cool.
she edited. I'm very much because of the nature of this piece. A lot of the writing happened in the edit room,
Okay,
so I sit with her. I mean, I
totally.
do the transcripts and I go through those to comb through and sort of figure out. For this piece, it's this sort of interesting little daisy chain because I didn't
Right,
have one central character. So I sort of introduce everybody, then we focus on the organizations for a minute, and then we get a little bit of people's individual storylines.
totally.
And that it was a little tricky for me to kind of figure all that out. And so you sort of do, I did the best I could with the transcripts and doing some version of an audio or a radio cut. And then we start to put things in and look at it and say, oh, well, really can't use that moment.
Right.
And at some points you sort of say, this is the best we can do with what we've got, so this is where we're going to land on it.
Okay, totally. Well, I do think that what you came out with in the edit feels really nice, and the flow of information. There's so much there, but it works in a way that's easy to process, easy to remember, easy to latch onto, um, and that gets me really excited, of course, for the other two episodes. Uh, in light of kind of shooting this one, maybe wanting a little bit more funds, wanting a little more B-roll, do you have anything planned or anything to take away that you want to put into part two?
So with part two, we're just starting the edit.
Okay.
So it's a little early for me to know exactly what I'm missing.
Right. Right.
I'm still sort of assessing, what do I have. At this point, I may try and squeeze out one more interview after September 1st, because that's when the law goes into effect.
Okay. Right.
But I was able to interview Morgan again just after 4002 fell, or fell it, after it was passed.
Right. It
And
dropped.
that was a huge blow to people in the retreatment space, in the treatment space. It was very important for me to try and catch those folks fresh off that
Right.
news. But I also, with my DP, Chris Fisher, shot for the second one. It was Timothy Wildgoose for the first one. Chris is based in Salem. And
Okay.
so Chris and I were able to get onto the chamber floor, the House chamber floor. We shot the day that they voted in the House.
Oh, wow.
And so we caught those really heartfelt. I mean, the conversations that were happening on the floor were amazing. And we were also that day able to rush over to Representative Rob Nose's office and get him to give us an interview. So it's a little bit more higher level with the policies and the politics.
Okay. Yeah.
Measure 110, whereas the first piece is a little more about the people most directly impacted, and their stories. So we're going to get a different kind of look at different stories involved. The difficulty with Decrim Recrim is that it's sort of like it's less visually exciting to look at.
Mm, right.
It's decrim is like, well, you're not arresting people for possession of small amounts, of
Right.
illicit drugs. So how do you shoot that? Like, how do
Right.
you
Right.
cover that visually? So it's a little bit more of a political storyline, I think.
Okay. Totally. Oh, well, that's interesting. And do you have a timeline for when you ideally would want this edit to be finished and out there?
I'm hoping that we'll have a solid rough cut in October, by the end of October. One thing that's ahead of us right now is that Piers is going to be obviously in the Oregon Documentary Film Festival. It's also in the Klamath Independent Film
Mm,
Festival. We've got that coming up. It's got another one that I can't announce just yet, that's in October, that's coming up down in LA. And then
Right.
um, I just found out today that it's going to be in the online for Friday Harbor
Oh, nice.
Documentary Film Festival. So we've got actually a lot happening with peers in the next couple of months. So that may
Totally.
impact my ability to, roll up my sleeves.
Right.
But but we're it's an exciting time right now. We've shot a lot. We're ready to roll. I've been cutting down the main interviews with Morgan and Joe from Recovery Works Northwest and Fernando from Instituto Latino. Those are my primary interviews.
Well, that's very exciting, and I do think that you touch on a good point there, which is that once you have your film finished and it's out there at the film festival run, I mean, putting a lot of work into the film festival showcasing itself is a part of, it's an active part of the filmmaking process. This is now, in post production after this, the showcase is very important. So it's good to be putting a lot of effort into that, taking a time, a couple months to do that, and then you can get into the dirty work of really cutting this next film.
Yeah.
Um, as a final question, I'm kind of curious, and this is for me as well as everyone who aspires to make great movies like this. You've studied journalism, you've made a lot of documentaries. Do you have anything very specific or big takeaway that you learned or that you could share with us on making films like this?
Well, personally, I think what matters most is my team.
Okay,
So I can't do all this by myself. Part of the program that I did, got me behind in the editor's chair and got me behind the camera, and those are all that's all well and fine. It informs me tremendously, but um, I'm not going to be my best editor, right?
right,
I'm not going to be my best camera person. So finding your team and feeling really good about the people that you're working with and what they can bring and what their skill sets are is everything, because to try and do all of this by yourself, it can be done, but it's usually it's going to be better when you have
right.
other people who can excel in areas where you don't. And now that we shot the first one on the Red, we've shot the second one in Black Magic environment, and we're dealing with big media,
Right.
and the media management part of it is overwhelming. And like right now, we're still struggling to get our DCP together for the Oregon
All
Documentary Film
right.
Festival. And there's just, for all kinds of little reasons and stuff, it's been a problem, right? And we're still unraveling that. And I could not have managed that on my own. So I think your people, your team, it's really, really critical. And I'm fortunate because my wife Marilis is an editor, and she's a very good one. And so she's able to do a lot of the heavy lifting that for me
Totally.
would be really challenging.
Well, I love that. I think that's great advice. And a lot of people sometimes go into a documentary and they want to be the jack of all trades. They want to make it really stripped down, but you have to rely on people. You have to make those connections, and you have to give a little bit of, some of the creative freedom away, and really trust a good team to make something that's really impactful. But Sarah, thank you so much for talking with me. I've learned a lot. I always enjoy talking with you, and I'm very excited to play the story project of Measure 110 at the Oregon Documentary Film Festival on September 29th. This is a topic everyone's thinking about, everyone's talking about. I think this is a fantastic, beautiful piece that takes a really important look at this, and I'm very excited for part two.
Well, I can't wait to see you in person.
Yes,
So
finally.
see you on the 29th, and I'm looking forward to it.
Excellent. Thank you so much.